Jason, we're getting down to kind of serious time in regards to coaches figuring out who's going to get playing time, who's winning spots. We're just a little over a week right now. So, what is the latest that you've been able to gather from fall camp?
Yeah, so as from a camp perspective, I think it ended last week with school starting this week for Oklahoma. So it's a little bit different. They're so obviously still going through practice and prep and stuff like that. And so there's a few positions where there's very close, I think, interesting battles still going on. I think on the offensive line side of it, everything that I've seen and heard kind of pointed to Savion Byrd, who's a redshirt freshman who has kind of overtaken Chris Murray, the UCLA transfer that was a starter last year at that right guard position. I think partly because Chris Murray has been a little bit banged up, but I think partly it's a kid that Beatonbow raved about last year, Mark, and a guy that really just from a technique perspective and just from a overall understanding of the playbook probably couldn't quite get on the field or make the time that he take advantage of that he really needed to get on the field. So I think that's a really significant battle, kind of still going to go back and forth between Bird and Murray on the offensive line. I think some of the other areas of the offenses are fairly solidified. There's no real battle at the quarterback position. I think it's firmly entrenched with Gabriel at one, and then you've got Davis Bevel, who I think is impressed enough to get that number two spot. I think Marcus Major has solidified himself as the number two running back right now behind Eric Gray, with a host of kids I think probably behind them. I would lean towards probably led by Javante Barnes at the third spot, but then you've got Bentavious Thompson, you've got Gavin Salchuk, you've got Tawi Walker, and a few others that are in that group. And one of the things that we've talked about from time to time, Mark, was related to Jeff Levy's offense. A lot of kids get carries. There was three kids last year, maybe four. I can't remember. Three or four kids from Ole Miss last year that got over 100 carries, and so Matt Corral was part of that got over 100. So you would absolutely expect that Dylan Gabriel would not get anywhere near the carries that Matt Corral would, and so I think all signs point to three backs probably getting in the neighborhood of 100 carries, and some others getting to 40 to 50 carries throughout the year, maybe a little bit more. So that'll be interesting to see how that is. But I think the top three are pretty are fairly solidified. On the defensive side of the ball, I think your defensive line. I think your top four again. Your starting four are pretty set in stone on the ends. You'll have Ethan Downs and Reggie Grimes. I think in the middle, from a nose tackle and defensive tackle perspective, you'll see Jeffrey Johnson and Jalen Redmond there as well. I think the biggest probably competition that's still going on, and I think Oklahoma fans will probably cringe a little bit when you hear this name, but what I'm hearing and seeing is Jaden Davis is probably right now the opposite cornerback from Woody Washington. And when I say cringe, he's not necessarily he's had a lot of inconsistencies. He doesn't have the height that some of the other ones have, or maybe some of the same athletic ability. But I think you've got to trust the coaching staff, I think, at this point. But I think it's the biggest surprise that I would see out of fall camp overall would be if Jaden Davis was one of the starting cornerbacks. So not necessarily in a bad way, Mark. You got kids that have a renewed sense of enthusiasm, or they feel different with a new staff coming in, and things like that. So, but I think most people probably didn't have him in their top four overall at that position coming in the fall camp. So I think he's done he must have done a really, really good job to earn that trust, at least early on so far. I think that's still fluid, right? I think that will still be something that keeps going from a battle perspective in fall camp. And I think the other thing that's a little bit surprising to at least me is, Oklahoma got a couple of 2 or 3 guys that I thought at least 2 of them were really gonna be plug and play guys. Trey Morrison came over from, North Carolina, CJ Colton came over from Wyoming. You kind of had the assumption that those 2 kids would just plug and play at the nickel spot and at the one of the cornerback spots, and it's not been the case. And you have to think that you have to give that as a testament to these kids that are currently here, because those kids have played a lot of football both at North Carolina and Wyoming, and even Kanai Walker to a certain extent. He's a younger kid, obviously only 1 year at Louisville there, but yeah, that's interesting. It's a good story. I think if it continues to materialize for Jaden Davis there across the board. So I think, but overall, Mark, I think the good thing is that you look at coming into the season is right now that you're pleased with. If you're Oklahoma, pleased with the effort, pleased with that. Brent Venables is very pleased with where they're at heading into this opening week, but I think you're also pleased with the development of Justin Harrington. Certainly, kind of came out of nowhere, so to speak, in terms of there was a story about him this week where he begged and pleaded with Venables. Called, text, wrote letters on numerous occasions to try to get back into the program, and he finally got back. And so he's a guy has been a little bit of a Swiss Army knife in the back end of the defense. He's a guy that can play that cheetah position. He can play nickel. He can play either the safety positions, and maybe could even play a little bit of corner. So I think it'll be interesting just in the mold of trying to get your best 11 players on the field at one time to see what that looks like. But over and above, you've got the you've got the TD Roof injury, but you don't have any other serious injuries out of fall camp, which is always going to be a big plus coming into the season.